Tonight, Mike Mussallem, our esteemed guest of the hour, will be presenting Dream Big and Innovative Culture.
Very good. Wow, what a nice introduction. You need a job, let me know. It's very impressive. All right, I'd really like to keep this informal because it's a lot more interesting for me if we can have more of a dialogue rather than me do all the talking. So I'm going to try and keep my remarks kind of compact so that we can have lots of time for Q&A. So it sounds like most of the audience is students, is that right? Students, one kind of flavor or another? Yeah, fantastic. You're not wearing jackets, so I'm out. So, yeah, this idea of dreaming big, I think, is something that you hear about, and believe me, I'm sort of a testament to that. I think that when you decide that you can open your mind up to possibilities, it's amazing what's possible, and you shouldn't let people try and limit you. I'm going to talk about things sort of from the Edwards perspective, but I do a lot of sort of talking to our employees and to all kinds of groups. I do employee meetings every quarter. So I've done it every quarter I've been in my job now for 16 years, so however many that is. And every place I go around the world, I do employee meetings. And one of my favorite parts of the meeting is they have this section called Ask Mike. And at Edwards, actually, you can do an Ask Mike anonymously. So you can really put zingers in there, right? You could put the nastiest questions you can imagine, like how come you get paid so much and stuff like that. And so I get all kinds of questions, everything from deep questions about strategy to how can you let those conditions continue in the second floor women's restroom and everything in between. So please, I would encourage you to collect your questions. Everything will be safe. Nothing off base. I do get a chance to travel a lot, so I get exposed to a lot just since the first of the year. I think outside the US, I've been in Munich, I've been in Tokyo, I've been in Beijing, in Shanghai, I've been in Dubai, I've been in Sao Paulo, I've been in Hainan, the Dominican Republic, and in Puerto Rico, and more. So I get exposed to a lot, and you wouldn't believe the questions I get, so please, I want you to be forthcoming with this. First of all, just so you to know how this happened, so my good friend happens to be the provost of Georgia Tech, my good friend Dr. Raphael Bras. And so we became friends back when he was in his previous life at UC Irvine, and because that was in the area and I was on the board of trustees, we got the chance to know each other, and we were having breakfast about 6-8 months ago, and he says, hey, you ought to come down and spend a little time with us. And it sounded like a great idea to me, and so that's really was the birth of this. And part of the encouragement is I already had pretty good friends here. So for example, right here, Dr. Yuganathan runs probably the most impressive bioengineering school in the country, if not the world, and we have a deep and long history with him. The sort of the embedded knowledge in things that we're deep in, like heart valves, is pretty special right here at this university. So it's just fun to come and catch up on that. And then also right over here at Emory University are probably some of our closest clinical collaborators, people that are deep with us. When we start talking about this medical technology, these guys are all the way in, cutting edge. And so I'm going to spend the morning over there with those guys. It'll be fun, and they'll be trying to get the latest things out of me, and I'll be trying to find out what they think of our latest things, and so we'll have fun together as well. So there's a little bit of the connection. But again, I look at this for me more as a learning experience rather than the other way around. So I'll start out by giving you a little bit of background. I was born, well, my name, Mussallem, is Lebanese heritage. So all my grandparents came from Lebanon, turn of the century. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. I look like such a little cherub there, don't I? I was actually probably a rotten kid. But my parents were pretty simple, working people, you know, with like probably lots of folks that come to America, their main goal was to try and give their kids a better life. And that's basically what they worked on. And I was one of 3 boys. My older brother was born with Down syndrome. And so in a way that sort of thrust me into the oldest because I was the next one born. And it was a gift to our family. You know, my brother George is fantastic. He's passed away at this point. But it's also become the centerpiece of my philanthropy. And just, I don't know if any of you know any people with Down syndrome, but they're a great source of love. So for me, I was always working. So I got a job early and often, and I had lots of jobs. One of my first jobs was a paper boy. This is, now for most of you, you don't even know what the heck a newspaper is, probably. They would never think about it. But back in the day, that was how people got their news. And so they used to have things called paper routes. And so I had 72 customers every day that I had to make sure that their paper got delivered to their house, right? And they all wanted it the right way. Please put it between my screen door and my outer door. I don't want it to get wet and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a responsibility, and they wanted it on time. And in addition to that, you had to visit those same 72 people every 2 weeks and collect for the paper. So I had to get 35 cents from 72 people every 2 weeks. Talk about a learning experience and a business degree. You learned a lot, everything about how to avoid dogs to, you know, people that would duck you and not really want to pay you, and other people who were so generous, and others that just wanted to talk, and everything in between, you can imagine. And so all those things sort of accumulate, I think, into what turns into who you are. When I started thinking about going to school later, I was trying to figure out how to fund my education. And we were fortunate that the steel mills were going great in those days. And what a job. You could get a union wage at the steel mills, which was a big deal for me. So that's where I spent my summers. And even when I was in engineering school, I used to sometimes come home on weekends, because weekends you could work like a Saturday and Sunday, get paid 40 hours. It was incredible. I learned a lot in the whole steel mill thing. Some of it, you know, it's funny. Sometimes you learn good habits and sometimes you avoid the bad ones. You know, part of what I learned in the steel mill was, you know, sort of the underside of the economy that wasn't so good. I remember, I'll give you an example. My very first day on the job, I was ready to go do it and show them how good I could be. And they gave me a gallon of safety yellow paint, not a gallon, but actually like a 15-gallon bucket, and something called a painter's mitt. And what you would do is just dip your mitt in this yellow paint. You could go down the handrails and paint the handrails. And this place was so huge, they had miles and miles of handrail. So in my first morning, I think I painted like a 1/4 mile of handrails. I was really proud of myself. Came back at lunch. Union steward put his arm around me and said, "Son, you're only here for the summer. Most of us are here all the time. Why don't you take a nap this afternoon?" Right? So there was the downside of, you know, people that were in it for work avoidance as opposed to trying to do something meaningful, and that probably left an impression on me as well. But anyway, I ended up going to Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. I actually started out Rose Poly, and the school's name changed while I was there, and I got a degree in chemical engineering. I'm not sure why I went in. I think I loved chemistry, I loved math, and I heard that chemical engineers got really well paid. So I was really deep back then in terms of my thinking. And when I got out, I interviewed for jobs, and where were the job interviews? They were in oil refineries and chemical plants. And I thought, wow, that's not what I was thinking of. So anyway, I went to work for Union Carbide, and I made Prestone antifreeze. And, you know, I worked hard at it. I was good at it. But I found after a short period of time that it wasn't really that fulfilling for me. It didn't really turn me on that much. I didn't feel like I was growing. The environment was sort of a slow-moving one where if you stayed enough years, you might get promoted, that sort of thing. I worked on my MBA in the evenings, and I read and heard about medical technology, and there were a couple of companies that were going pretty good back then, one called Abbott, one called Baxter, and I interviewed with them and took a job with Baxter. This goes a long time ago, 1979. I was very nervous about going in the whole field of medical technology because even though I was pretty good at, blow molding bottles and all kinds of crazy stuff in the chemical and plastics industry, the idea of going into medicine, that whole field was a little scary, and so I took a step back and I really worked hard to make sure that I would establish some credibility. And I actually started in the manufacturing side of things. It wasn't very long that they decided, the head of manufacturing said, we need to get some people into product development that know how to manufacture things. They keep designing these products that we can't manufacture, and so they stuck me in product development. And you can imagine the product development teams were not really excited to get somebody that came from manufacturing, so what do? They give you the worst job, right? The most complained about, the lowest tech, products that there were. These were actually IV sets. So the vinyl tube that plugs, the PVC tube that plugs into the IV bag and then plugs into the patient, those are all custom configured, and they're constant source of problems, and people just try and make them cheap and so forth. So the good news was, you could take something, and the people that were working with me at the time were sort of the dirty dozen, sort of like guys that were at the bottom of the class sort of characters, and so you could understand why products weren't well developed. But it became an opportunity for me because you could fix it, right? It didn't take a lot to start making things better, and actually became a little bit of a theme for my career that I remember. I know a lot of people go through their careers and say, wow, if I could just get in that high profile, really super cool area, wouldn't that be great? And they forget about the opportunities when somebody gives you the dirty job and the job that's not that exciting and the job that doesn't seem that important or impressive and nobody really cares about. Those are the opportunities where somebody's likely to give you a big responsibility because there's almost like no downside. Like, they can't screw it up. It's already pretty bad. So let's give it to him. And I had those kind of opportunities throughout my career. And so I'd point that out as something to think about as you're charting your own career. So life went on for me at Baxter. I worked for Baxter for 20 years, had a wide range of different kinds of responsibilities throughout medicine. Ultimately got involved with cardiovascular medicine. I kind of liked it. It was different. I was in a generic drug business as well. When you're in a business like that, you're selling millions of pills and so forth. And almost the people on the other side are almost faceless, nameless people you're selling to, organizations and so forth. In the cardiovascular thing, when you're making something like a heart valve, it was very personal. It felt like it was palpable. I could feel the people on the other end. You knew if you did something really good or really bad, you got feedback, right? It was more like a speedboat, not some kind of a great big battleship. And so I learned that about myself. It was a kind of business with that palpable feel that was a little better for me. And I think part of what I would suggest to each of you is to learn something about yourself in terms of, what kind of person you are and what you like in whatever you're going to choose to do in the future. So anyway, along the way in Baxter, 20 years, it was one of those environments, it was a great environment that if you got something done, somebody gave you more to do. And I had one of those kind of lives where I just got more to do and ultimately got into general management, started in dirty little jobs and, had some success and got more and more responsibility. So now we're in like 98, 99. I'm responsible for several businesses inside Baxter, including this cardiovascular business. We're doing these strategy plans. Every year we do these long-range strategy plans about where we're going to go in the future. And we were doing lousy. We had a low growth rate, low profitability, not very exciting. And in the 90s, in cardiovascular medicine, everybody was cooking. I mean, if you were any of our competitors, so it was Medtronic, Guidance, St. Jude, Boston Scientific, everybody was going to the moon in the 90s, and here we were failing. And so I was going to do this deep analysis to find out what the problem was. And it actually didn't take a lot of deep analysis. It was pretty simple. The innovation was gone. We had stopped innovating. And it wasn't a purposeful thing. It's not like people sat around the table and said, let's stop innovating. It sort of drifted away and leaked away little by little. And it sometimes happens to you in big companies. You get in this situation where you make a commitment to the corporation that you're going to grow your business this much. And the corporation makes a commitment to their shareholders. So then things don't go the way you planned it, right? They never go the way you planned it. And you say, well, I have to make some adjustments because the sales aren't there, so I'll cut some expenses, I'll cut some R&D, I'll cut some of our field force, and you make your commitments. Okay, then the next year you need to grow off that. Yeah, but the sales still aren't there, so I better cut a little more, because if I cut a little more expenses, then I can drop more through, make my contribution to the bottom line. You do that enough years, and guess what? You strip out all the spending, all the spirit, all the heart, all that, right? And that's what happened to us. So we raised our hand and said, okay, here's what we suggest. Let's either just pump a lot of money back into this business. Well, that wasn't going to happen because all the other businesses were doing better, and for Baxter to grow, they would have had to starve the other businesses to pump business into this one, and this was their lowest performing business. So you know what, let's buy something else and bolt it on. Let's buy St. Jude or Boston Scientific at the time, would have been purchasable by Baxter. There was a new CEO at Baxter. He wasn't really excited about making a big bet in that space. And the other one was to exit. And Baxter had some success with spin-offs, and so that's ultimately was decided. Let's just spin off this cardiovascular business. And I raised my hand and said, I'd love to do that. I'm your guy. And so April 3rd of 2000, we created this new thing. We rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. There were about 5,000 people. You know, I had a big rah-rah speech. They were all the way in. You know, we can do it. I was totally idealistic, right? We're going to do it. We're going to start growing. We're going to start innovating. We're going to make this happen. But the company wasn't so good back then, right? It wasn't in great shape. But we went out with a lot of enthusiasm. And that was the first day that Edwards was born. Well, it's pretty interesting. You could put yourself in my shoes. You got a brand new company. Okay, who are you, right? Who are you? What are you going to be? What are you going to stand for? Where are you going to go? Cool questions. Like, wow, to have that kind of an opportunity. And this was part of the dreaming big. You'd say, okay, who are we? And so I looked around at lots of other companies. I don't know whether you have mission statements and vision statements and this, that, and the other thing. And out of all the thing that was out there, what I sort of liked was something that J&J did. They called it their credo. And so we actually took a page out of that book, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. But we really wanted to transform the company. You had to maintain credibility back then, because if you said, hey, I'm going to the moon, no one's going to believe you. You had to put together a plan that says, okay, I'm going to walk, and then I'm going to trot, and then I'm going to run. And here's how this is going to go, because you wanted to keep the hearts and minds of your own people, your customers, and have credibility that you were going to do this, but you knew it was going to take you some time to do it. So that was the fun that we got into. One of the things we did more than anything else was put the focus on patients. When you create a company, there's different ways that you can run it. So we're really good at a few things. So for example, we were fantastic at processing tissue, right? We made tissue heart valves. We were the best at tissue heart valves in the world. Boy, I wonder if we should just take a technology focus and let's see where tissue could take us. How many uses could there be in the body and so forth? That's one way you could have focused. A different way you could have focused, let's say, let's have a customer focus. Who can be against a customer focus, right? Our leading customers are heart surgeons. You know what we ought to do is just, let's go be the heart surgeon's best friend. Let's go see what they need. But you know, as we analyzed the future, we said, you know, the problem with technologies is they run the risk of being obsoleted. And so if you have a technology-based strategy, are you, by its nature, somewhat fragile and subject to disruption? And if you have a customer-based strategy, well, what if cardiac surgeons aren't going to be the most important people in the future? What if there's other specialties that disrupt them? And so what we decided to do is that we would build our company and our focus around the patients and their disease. And we said, if there's one thing we know is going to be there, that disease is going to be there. And if we make that our enemy and that our goal, we're going to have a robust strategy. And so we took on this focus and we built everything around a patient focus. As a matter of fact, this was back when, you guys remember when Bill Clinton was president and he said he put a sign on the desk that reminded himself, it's the economy, stupid. Well, I sort of took a page out of that book and I had a sign on my desk. It's been there ever since. It's the patient, stupid. Try and remind myself, because every day you get pulled in a lot of different directions you can imagine by your investors and by your customers and employees and so forth, and you want to remember what's really important. And so this is who we decided we were going to be, patient focused, focused on innovation, and doing big things, right? We weren't doing trivial things. We were talking about things where people's lives actually were at stake. Either were seriously ill, critically ill, needed help. And that's who we were. So our credo, it's a little longer than this. I shortened this for the slide. It said simple things. We're dedicated to providing innovative solutions for people fighting cardiovascular disease. We focused on the fact that we would be trusted partners with everybody that we deal with, and that we could do that we would unify stakeholders. So it didn't matter, it was our employees, our customers, our patients, our shareholders, that we were going to speak the same language to all of them, and we were going to focus on improving the quality of life of patients. And we end it with helping patients is our life's work and life is now. And we talk about it all the time. It's not something that goes in the bottom drawer. We talk about it all the time. We also wanted to be a company, and this is part of dreaming big, that aspired to be something more than we were. So we wrote down aspirations. These aren't like your annual operating plan, or what am I going to do next year? This is, okay, what do I dream? What do I want to be when I grow up? And we wrote these aspirations. We actually changed them over the years. We probably had more humble aspirations. I know when we spun out in 2000, they were way more humble, but we ended up achieving our aspirations. So it's kind of cool when you have to change your aspirations. This is where we are right now, transforming patient care through innovative technology, excels as a trusted partner through the quality of our work, attract and engage talented employees, strengthens our community. What we mean is we want to be the kind of people that give more to the community than we take, right? That the community is a little better place because we're around. And if you get all that right, hopefully your shareholders do well. And in our case, that's gone really well for us. You know, over the years, we think about how to keep our culture fresh. And one of the things that happens is you end up with lots of requirements for compliance and all kinds of things that sort of sometimes slow you down and hold you back. And so we sort of adopted this thing we called our secret sauce that have a lot of our favorite little qualities that we like to have involved. You know, one of these is dream big, and we talk about that a lot. But there we have about 6 or 7 ingredients of our secret sauce. Another one is don't blame, learn. So one of the things that we found in our old culture, it was kind of a blaming culture. When something went wrong, we blamed somebody, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say somebody floats a really bold project and says, let's spend some money, let's do this thing. And they go around and they visit all the executives in the company, and finally they get the sale, right? And so you go take your idea out and you got the money, you're so happy, and you start working on your project on how you're going to change the world, and guess what? It does not go the way you planned it. It never does. Never does. But you're kind of embarrassed because you asked everybody for this money, so you keep your head down and you work on it harder. You don't tell people that it's not going well, and next thing you know, you have a disaster. And so then there's a bunch of money gets lost, it's not going to work, we have a public hanging, and it reinforces for everybody, boy, I don't think I'll try to do anything very bold. And you get in this whole blaming thing. And we say, what if you could have a culture where it was more of a learning culture, where you said, you know what, we know you're going to make mistakes. When you do it, please just do me a favor. Raise your hand, say, I made a mistake, but I got plan B. I'm going to turn right, and we're going to be able to probably fix this thing. And we're resourceful, and we're smart, and we're going to figure it out. But let's please admit your mistakes, not blame others. take it on and go. And it was a key element to getting innovation going, is to get that kind of culture going. We also have one of these that says, welcome surprises. I became a student of innovation. I studied it like crazy to try and understand what makes companies, how come these small companies are innovative, but big ones aren't? What makes companies innovative and so forth? And part of my theory was that necessity was the mother of invention. And I mentioned it to one day to a guy who was a brilliant scientist down at UCSD, actually. His name was Ernie Beutner. He was head of our scientific advisory board. Brilliant guy. And when I said necessity was the mother of invention, he just sort of looked at me and he said, no way. I said, what do you mean, no way? He says, do you have any idea where most of the great discoveries come from our laboratories? He says, it's when people get surprised. Things happen to them, they see something, and they're bright enough to recognize, hey, what just happened here? What might this be? And so it also helped shape my thinking. So this welcome surprises is part of it. Seek diverse perspectives. You know, the other thing that we all do, right, is we like to surround ourselves with people that are kind of like us, right? And when you're working on new ideas, that's probably the worst thing that you can do. It makes it really comfortable if people are kind of like you, right? They're sort of from the same culture and, you know, the same sex, the same religion, the same country, you name it. But when you get diverse perspectives that are coming from all over the place, you get better ideas. You get challenged more, you're deeper thinking, and you generally come out in a better place. So those are some of the elements of secret sauce. So anyway, our strategy evolved over the years. I wouldn't say we ended up where we are today instantly. It took us a little bit of time to get there, but at this point, I pride myself that we were able to put our strategy on one page. And this is it. I talk about it all the time. It's a pretty simple strategy. Number one, it is patient-centric. Our theory is that patients are still dramatically underserved. And no matter how cool you think medicine is today, and it's very cool compared to where it was for our parents or our grandparents, incredible, right? But compared to how it could be, our belief is it could be a lot better. And if you believe that, then there's lots of opportunity. And we say, let's not do the little things, let's do the big things. Let's transform care, right? Let's not look and say, how do I make the heart valve a little better? Say, how do I do something for this heart valve patient that's way better? Think bigger, right? Transform care, big problems. We try and do the tough stuff, right? Because if it's easy stuff, probably, you know, 3 guys in a garage in China are going to knock you off anyway, right? Let's go do the hard stuff. The other thing we say is, so we're going to focus on breakthroughs, but we're going to stay specifically focused. We're not going to go everywhere. We're going to stick to our roots. We call it structural heart disease. So not just heart disease, but just structural heart disease. So for example, what's the biggest part of heart disease is the whole atherosclerotic process, right? We don't even work on that. This is, you know, plaque buildup in your arteries and veins. We say, you know what, there are already pretty good solutions for that. But structures of the heart have problems. One of the big ones are valves, but it goes beyond that. There's holes in the hearts, there's congenital defects, there's things that happen to you when you get into heart failure. Can we do something about that? So we say just structural heart disease and our roots in critical care, that's the only place we're going to go. And this is actually really different than our competitors, because right now our competitors are diversifying. They're buying each other and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're saying not interested. Matter of fact, I'm sort of this is a little weird, you probably to hear from a public company CEO. For me, I don't consider size a mark of success. I don't say, oh, I can't wait to get bigger. Actually, I think the longer we can stay small, the better. It's more important to be growing, right? Going somewhere important, I think is the more important thing. So that's what I stay focused on. The other thing we do is we constantly look at our portfolio and we throw things overboard. When we get things that are in a position that they've sort of become commodities, like we make one, but there's 3 other people that make them just as good, I decide it's time to get out, right? We're sort of these high value add guys, and let's just do the things that our customers really want from us, and let's not do the other things, because the other things sort of sap your energy, right? Not only do they take your money, but they take all the time of the team. And so we actively manage the portfolio. And then the other key element of it is leadership. We like to go first. Now, it sounds trivial. Who doesn't like to go first? Actually, first, from a business context, has got a lot of issues, right? Because what happens when you're the first into a new technology? Well, basically, you don't know what you're doing, right? Because no one's ever done it before. So you're creating a road where there is no road. And you might be going in the wrong direction. You might waste a lot of money. You might waste a lot of time. And there's a bunch of people in the business world that say, fast follower, now there's a good strategy, right? You just come in behind the people, just do it. Let's do it better, quicker, faster, cheaper, you know, all that. That's a good strategy. That's not us. We like to go first. What are some of the advantages of going first? Well, you gain some credibility. You get to be buddies with people from Georgia Tech and Emory because they want to be with leaders. You get a chance to actually shape the environment. When you design the clinical trial or decide what kind of evidence should be necessary to get a product paid for, you're the one at the table discussing that. You're not following the path that somebody else. So there are advantages to going first, but we believe that, and we work really hard to have these trusted relationships. You can imagine the strategy is a long-term one. So when we start something to when we complete it, years and years, right? So even though companies get measured in quarters, we've got strategies that stretch out here for years, and so they better be good ones. And the other thing we do to sort of make this go, because it's a little tricky to innovate in medical technology, is to have shots on goal. Most really good, we pride ourselves in getting really good ideas and sorting through. We get thousands of ideas from all kinds of places. We sort through them all, we pick the best ideas. What's the chance of a really good idea making it through the gauntlet? I don't know, 20%, maybe 30%, something like that. Can you pick the winners in the beginning? Yeah, we have like the smartest people around, and it's almost impossible. So we sort of deploy this strategy called shots on goal, which is let's have enough shots on goal that maybe one of those guys are going to go in, right, or a few of them. And so we feel like we have to be realistic and humble about what it really takes to innovate in this space. So that's who we are. I'm going to tell you about probably one of the most exciting technologies we've been involved in, and this is replacing a heart valve without open heart surgery. Traditional heart valve surgery, saw open your chest, open it, stop your heart, pump your blood through a heart-lung machine, cut out the heart, and cut out the heart valve and sew in a new one. Here it is, a catheter in the upper thigh. You introduce a wire, and then over that, a catheter. And that catheter had a balloon on it, and the balloon goes into this stenosed heart valve, and it opens it up so that you can have something a little bigger across. And now you have the business end, and you've got a heart valve that's compressed onto a balloon that you advance up this catheter. It's a very sophisticated catheter system. The catheter system has steerable features into it so that you can avoid scraping the aorta or any of those kind of things which you're very nervous about doing anything that'll disturb the anatomy. And you come right up around the arch, and again, this is the diseased valve. This valve has collected calcium for years and years of heartbeats. Usually it's older people that have that. And so it's stiff, almost chalky, almost bone-like. And so now that we've opened it with a balloon here, we're able to get this over it. And once it's properly in place, and they're looking at it with X-ray technology called an angiogram, it gets positioned very carefully, and there's a bunch of steering features. And just when it's in the right place, everybody in the room decides, and they say, ready, let's deploy. You rapid pace the heart and inflate the balloon. So, and then you pull the system out, and that heart valve has pushed aside the diseased heart valve, immediately starts beating, and you've replaced the heart valve without open heart surgery. Why do you rapid pace? When the heart is pumping, it's applying pressure. You don't want that pressure just when you're inflating the balloon. When you rapid pace the heart, it actually doesn't really pump anything, right? And so for those few seconds, and we only do it for a matter of 5-10 seconds, you basically stop the heart. This has happened now with our valves around 140,000 times around the world. Extremely successful, redefining medicine. The regulators, wow, you don't want to see that, do you? The regulators made us go through our paces. And so we started on the sickest people, people that had 2 weeks to live, right? Those were the first 25 people that were treated back in 2004, 2005. And then little by little by little by little, a little healthier people, a little healthier people, a little healthier people. There's going to be data that comes out at the American College of Cardiology meeting this next weekend that's done the biggest heart valve study. We just completed the biggest heart valve study that's ever been done. The folks at Emory were a big part of that, but there were 50 hospitals across the US. And we're going to see patients on 3,000 patients worth of data on these so-called people who are intermediate risk to go through open heart surgery. So they could go through open heart surgery, but they might have had somewhere like a 3 to 8% chance of dying at the end of 30 days after the open heart surgery. So not super risky, but not great either. And those exact patients were randomized between the old technology and the new technology. So we'll see that data. It'll be very exciting this weekend. Anyway, that's the cool stuff that we get to do at this point, and it's built our confidence. And so what it's done, it says, you know, with these little interventional tools, what else can we go and do? What else can we go and do to structures of the heart? Particularly, there's a lot of people that suffer from heart failure. Can we do anything about heart failure? What can we do for other valves, like the mitral valve that has lots of disease? So we're working on all that stuff very aggressively right now. Again, some of them we're already in with clinical partners. Some are still in the laboratory that we're working on. We're very aggressive. We spend 16% of our sales in R&D, which is probably double the rate that most companies our size spend, and we're going after it. So it's a very exciting time. We're trying to live this dream big, and we really believe that we can transform cardiovascular care. So I've talked a long time now, I feel like. The thing that you keep in mind, and probably is the single most important factor for me personally and for the employees that work at our company, is the impact that it has on patient lives. The technology is cool and all that stuff, but it's the patients that are the other end of this that it absolutely changes their lives. You think about somebody with this disease, this aortic stenosis. Okay, there's multiple diseases that we could treat, but this disease in particular is called aortic stenosis. I mentioned that your heart valve, which has 3 leaflets and normally is very pliable and opens and closes, it collects circulating calcium and eventually stiffer and stiffer to the point where it's not really opening and it's not really closing. And when that happens, what happens is the patient's heart is trying to work against that. So they end up with very strong ventricles, strong hearts, but they're trying to pump against all this back pressure and then refill again. And the result is people get less blood flow. And what happens when you get less blood flow? Less blood to your brain and organs, less energy. I'm slowing down, right? And it gets misdiagnosed all the time. People just think they're getting old. And really, they have their aortic valve is just closing up. And so when you have this procedure, and they knew it in surgery, and surgery's been miraculous, this open heart surgery, but you had to recover from having your chest sawed open and your blood pumped through a heart-lung machine. But a procedure like this, where you can go and this happens pretty fast, we have people going home the next day. Matter of fact, we have people actually that are doing this with local anesthetic, if you can imagine, right? Just sort of make the site numb, advance it while the patient's lightly sedated. Okay, we're going to inflate the balloon now. Do you feel dizzy? Okay, no, the valve's in place now, that sort of thing. So their recovery is amazing. They go from gray to pink almost immediately. They're like, wow, what just happened to me? I feel great, almost a Lazarus effect. It's remarkable. And so, you know, our docs say I've never been kissed by so many 80-year-olds in my life, right? you just have these spectacular stories, and we've gotten a chance to know so many of these patients, and me personally, I've gotten a chance to know so many. And it's the thing that keeps you going, keeps you sharp, keep you driven, keep you dreaming big. I'll share with you just before we go to Q&A, one video of one of my favorite guys, who you'll get a feel for him.
Oh, yes. That's dirty pool, Benny. But if you want to play dirty, it's okay with me. I'm 92 years old, and I'm a go-getter. I don't let things just happen. I make them happen. That's my point. Oh!
Les is a force of nature. His vibrance is contagious.
Everybody is always amazed that he's as old as he is and gets as much accomplished.
I was always an active person. Playing tennis, playing baseball, bowling. I had a very active life. I hope you got that. That's what I hope. I lived in Chicago all my life. In 1940, I joined the Illinois National Guard. And in 1941, I landed in the Philippines. December 7th, the war started, and I now was in the war. We held out on Bataan for 4 months until ordered to surrender. The Japanese began to march us to our first prison camp.
Oops. What just happened? Okay. Sit tight, guys.
About 86 miles. They gave us no food, they gave us no water, and they beat the men all along the way. They then took me to Japan, and for 3 years I was a slave laborer in a coal mine, shoveling coal 12 hours a day, every day. I weighed 185 pounds when I enlisted, and when it ended, I barely weighed 100. After the war, went to school on the GI Bill, ended up with a doctorate degree, and of course married Betty.
When I first met him, he told me all the things that he had done, and I thought he was just full of baloney. And then I married him, and I found out he does do all these things.
As I got older, I sat down and wrote a book. And I made the decision that I had to get an apology from the Japanese.
When he was maybe 88, I noticed he started to slow down.
And it progressively got worse to the point where even combing his hair, brushing his teeth, he was getting more and more winded. We went to a cardiologist who said, yes, your heart is definitely weakening, and my guess is in 2 years you'll be gone.
I was really concerned. I don't think I slept all night.
The cardiologist said that in order to improve his heart function, he would need a valve replacement. But that was extremely dangerous because he had had a previous open heart surgery.
I think I got it now. One of the important reasons why I had to have something done with my valve was that the Japanese had finally invited us to Japan to receive an apology.
It was coming up in just a few months, and it meant everything to him.
The doctor said no, there was nothing they could do, and I said, no way, there's got to be another way of doing it. I found that Scripps Institute, right here in San Diego, had a minimally invasive procedure. It was the Edwards Lifesciences valve.
In Lester's case, he was short of breath, as are most patients with aortic stenosis. He was an 89-year-old at the time that really wanted to live life to the fullest and was being held back by the valve. So we decided we would implant the transcatheter valve through the transapical approach.
He said, well, we'll make a small incision in your rib cage and go directly into the heart, no problem.
It's about 10 centimeters. Well, the transapical approach is very nice because the distance from the apex to the heart is extremely short, so the delivery distance is very short.
They did the procedure, and it was a huge success.
The valve seated well, it performed very nicely, relieved his aortic stenosis, and so he felt well right away.
The outcome of the transcatheter valve replacement in Lester was really phenomenal. Within a month, he seemed to be feeling a lot better.
I was ready to play tennis. I was ready to play bridge. I was ready to go lawn bowling. I was ready to do everything.
Lester's clearly one of our model patients. It's been over 2 years, and he's going strong. His valve's doing great.
When you see these patients in follow-up, I've never been kissed by more 80-year-old men in my life who could come in and say, I can finally breathe again.
Now, Les is a little bit slower than he used to be, but he still is accomplishing miracles.
Will you get me a movie, please?
Les started an organization called Care Packages from Home, where we send boxes to all the forces in Afghanistan.
We've already sent over 15,000 boxes, which has accommodated almost 140,000 of our troops.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was nice.
Les bounces back. Les loves life.
And by golly, I did go to Japan with 7 other POWs, and we did receive the apology from the Japanese government. Another milestone.
Successful.
Les is the most important part of our family. And through your work, we were able to continue to enjoy Les at the same level of vibrance and energy that we've known and loved. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you and the rest of the Edwards team for the wonderful service you did for my husband, and we give our thanks and hope you can do this for many, many more people.
All of you there, whatever you did for Edwards Life Sciences is what helped me survive and be where I am today. So I have to thank you very much for everything you've done. I'm very grateful.
So we make these, what's a great story, isn't it, this guy? Thank you. We make these video stories routinely to share with our employees because that's, like I said, that's what keeps us going. So forget about whatever you hear about heroes in the business world. Talk about heroes where you get inspiration. He didn't really tell half the story. I mean, he was beaten badly, right? And it's amazing. He actually came up, he tells the story coming up and seeing the mushroom cloud over Nagasaki when he had been working in that coal mine in Japan, and that was the moment that he knew that he was going to be free. He had been married. His wife thought he was dead, and so she had remarried, so he came back to that. You know, you can imagine the stuff that happened in his life, and when he was told that he couldn't get surgery, he just refused to take no for an answer. He went all over the internet. He actually found it at the Cleveland Clinic first, and then, you know, networked around and finally found out that actually he didn't have to go that far. But there's the kind of person that says, you know, I'm not going to quit. I've got things to do. I'm going to dream big, and makes it happen. And those are the people that actually inspire me and the rest of the team over at Edwards. So let's stop right there. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'd welcome a chance to engage with you on any kind of questions or comments. Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. So 2 things. You asked about the size, and you also said, how do you change it from a blaming culture to a learning culture? And it's a great question. And well, first from a size perspective, when we spun out, we were about 5,000 people, but we were in some businesses that we shouldn't have been in, and so we sold a couple of businesses that had probably 2,000 employees, and then ultimately have built back up. We're about 10,000 employees right now. But if you look at it from what are we worth, we were worth, I don't know, $795 million a day of spin, and I think we're around $18, $19 billion in market cap today, so about 20 times. But the culture part is an interesting one. So it's a test of leadership. And so it's how does leadership handle failure, right? And you need to be able to handle it, take it, and not punish when people fail. And sounds easy, but you get tested every single day, right? Every time, you're looking and you don't want people to make a habit out of failure. You don't want to say, yeah, that's the way to go, you failed again, fantastic. But you also don't want to punish people for honest failures, right? When they reach big, and they do try and do something really bold, and they fall short, you just can't punish that. As a matter of fact, you find ways even to celebrate it. Even when we decide that we're going to shut down programs sometime, we have a celebration. We do everything we can to protect the team and find new jobs for them because people are watching all the time. Is that just talk, or are they living the values? Are they walking the talk? And it's a tough thing to do, and you're never finished, and you're sort of proving it constantly. But it's being able, as a leader, and it doesn't matter whether it's some great big program or just somebody that's working for you that's trying to do something that fails, being able to handle that failure is important, because part of what you're trying to reinforce is, okay, we all are always trying to improve, and that's just like, so what's the easiest thing I can do? Well, let's just make a small improvement. Right? I can see it. It's not very big, and it's not very risky, and that's fine. So, okay, that's good. Small improvements are fine. We love small improvements. But how about the people that are willing to go for big improvements? Say, no, let's change everything. Why even, keep doing it that way? Let's change everything. So do you want people to go for the change everything, or do you just want small improvements? If you want the big improvements, you better be able to tolerate some failure, because when you dream that big, you're probably wrong, right? You're probably wrong. But, maybe you can adjust and shift and think and wiggle and dance and lead and cajole and find a way to get some really big things done. So that's the culture, and it's never an easy one. You talk about it all the time, but you try and live it, and hopefully you get there over time to get people to be bolder and be willing to take those bigger reaches. Yeah. Yes.
I have a quick question regarding your product. After it's placed, approximately how long does it actually last before it needs to be replaced? And also, after it's actually placed, for those waiting to receive it, how widely available is it for those that are looking to get that procedure done? Yeah,
so good question. So in surgical heart valves, these are the one where you open the chest and so forth, we have a reputation for having the most durable heart valve. What happens is tissue heart valves are prescribed for older people because there's a fear of ever doing 2 of those open heart procedures. Because once you open somebody's chest up the first time, you don't really want to go back in there a second time because they've got all that scar tissue and they're likely to bleed. So they do everything within their power to make sure that you don't have a second surgery. And the way we distinguish ourselves is to have valves that last a long time. And we have valves, depending on how you look at it, 15, 20, 25 years. Many times they last even longer than that. So incredible. It's not a one-size-fits-all because, as the professor will tell you, a child calcifies very quickly. A very old person calcifies very slowly. So it's a little bit more complex question. So it depends on how old you are in terms of how long you're going to have it. But you think about those kind of time frames in general. With this valve, no one really knows how long it's going to last. So we have brilliant engineers and we have incredible models that we run in the laboratory. And the laboratory will tell us that we can get 1 billion heartbeats out of this, right? Which is like 20 years of heartbeats. But what is the lab? Well, the lab is our very best approximation of what's happening in the human body. We try and get the pH right and the viscosity of the fluid right and all that kind of stuff so that it simulates it. But there's nothing quite like a human being, right? Because we're electrical and biological and chemical and all kinds of stuff going on inside. And so you never really know till you know. And because we've squeezed that down on a balloon and opened it back up, did we do anything to introduce some stresses that are someday going to come to roost. So these are questions that, we try hard to understand. The good news is, we've got a pretty good group of patients out at 5 years at this point. No structural defects reported. Pretty impressive, okay? Pretty nice. I mean, you love to have that. But do we have really long-term data? No, because the people that we started on were people that had a very short life expectancy. So we're still waiting for that. So it's not an ideal procedure. You wouldn't say, hey, if you're your age, you're not going to ask for that unless you have no other choices, right? If there's some other real reasons why you need to get it. So let's see, you had another part of your question?
Yes, also the approximate wait time.
Oh, the wait time. So the valve is approved in 65 countries around the world at this point, so pretty much all across Europe, many of the countries in Asia, certainly the US. Right now, what it's approved for is people that have severe aortic stenosis, so it means that valve's pretty closed up. There's a specific measurement associated with it. And you're at high risk for open heart surgery. So you could go through the surgery, but you're considered a high-risk candidate. So you have more than a 10% chance of not surviving the surgery, okay? What we're doing trials to do is to open it up to people that are at intermediate risk, right? So we're going to see that data this coming weekend. And we've just started a trial for people that are low risk for open heart surgery. So they have severe aortic stenosis, but they're healthy as a horse, and they could go through surgery just fine. Well, we're going to do a randomized trial to see, would you do better with a transcatheter heart valve? So it's going to take more years to prove that out, but we have a lot of confidence that it's going to demonstrate to be the best therapy. So.
Mike, we got time for a couple more questions.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my Ask Mike question. When the company made the transition from Baxter to Edwards, from a cultural standpoint, did you modify the performance metrics, appraisal systems, and the compensation systems, for example, at Edwards to encourage innovation?
So the short answer is yes. We changed everything. People didn't get paid more, but they got paid differently, right? We instituted something we call a key operating driver. So in addition to paying people to hit the plans, we paid people to hit milestones and say, you know what, it's a multi-year effort. If we get these done this year, right, we're going to reward for that. So that there was something for people that are involved in things like R&D that say, I'm not going to have any sales or any product for years to come, but I'm going to get my product designed, I'm going to get all my validations done, maybe I'm going to have in position to start human use, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, we have a lot of those milestones that we reward for. We also changed our system from being an annual system where everything was sort of big company way is what are you going to do in 2016 and all that, to fund the milestones. So here's some money. When you get something done, sort of like the venture capitalists do, when you achieve your milestones, you'll get more money to take the next step. And so we built systems around the innovation process. Yes?
Hi, so the work that you do, obviously it's inspired and you're going towards a purpose for finding solutions for patient care. And naturally, there's no one individual that can do that themselves. So how do you, as a leader and as a driving force behind what you're trying to do, find other similarly minded individuals that are passionate and as determined towards your goal as you are?
Yeah, well, that's the big deal, right? So we have a very serious talent development process and talent leadership process. We try and define what are the core competencies that we need. So these are like the technical talents. But separate from that, what are the traits that we're looking for in the individuals that'll be successful inside our company? And we try and delineate those. So one that you might find interesting, we call it an in-check ego, right? So people need to have enough confidence, but they can't be jerks to the point where people don't want to work with them and their ego is so big that they're just not fun to be around. So we have certain traits that we look for as well. And then we're constantly trying to develop people. How do we help you get better? How do we give you honest feedback? Okay, here's what you're fabulous on. Here's some things that you might work on. Can we give you those experiences, whether it's going to classes or getting this new assignment that's going to stretch you and so forth. And we think about that a lot. And it's very dynamic. You're never, ever finished with it. It's probably the single most important part of my job. I put endless hours into just that, because when you get that right, everything happens. Because it's obviously, it's not me. I'm not making the calls. I'm not there. You know, I'm here with you while people are doing, you know, great things all over the world. That's really what it's all about. And it's funny because the needs of the company are constantly changing, and each of us as individuals are constantly changing. Some of us are growing fast, some of us are having setbacks in life and all that, and you're constantly trying to sort that out and get it just right. Yeah.
Mike, got a question.
Yeah.
Hi. Having a patient-centric strategy in your organization, I can see that as a big motivator for innovative thinking. And as in this story you the story you showed, having a face to the term patient, I can see how that's even bigger. Do you have any opportunities in place for your employees, the big thinkers, the innovators, to interact with the patients to make it even more important for them?
Perfect question. And matter of fact, we work on that all the time. So we have a couple of cool opportunities that happen. Number one is our heart valves are serial numbered. So we send people a card and say, hey, you got a heart valve, here's your serial number. And matter of fact, if you want to come and visit us, you can meet the person that actually sewed your heart valve and inspected your heart valve. And we have those reunions that take place on a regular basis, which is incredible. You would imagine the tears that flow because the patients say, wow, you made that's inside me and keep me alive. And our employees, I mean, forget any speech that management ever makes about quality. Just think about meeting somebody that's staying alive because of your stuff. We just had a patient day where we had 50 patients come and each one bring a caregiver and spend the day getting to know each other and network around the company. We try and have patients visit our employee meetings. They'll stand at the stage and talk and then hang around afterwards and meet people individually. And we have more and more of our individual departments that are getting a patient, bringing them in, talking to them. So we're sort of on a journey. You know, right now it's still a little big picture, but what you're saying is exactly where we want to go. How can you make it really even more personal for everybody involved?
A couple more questions, Mike.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you really welcome surprises, but with that, I'm guessing that there are probably some maybe negative surprises. So how do you embrace the negative surprises?
How do you do what with them?
How do you embrace the negative surprises?
With great pain. They happen all the time. It's one of the hardest parts of the job. You get surprised and you get news that you don't like. And it's just awful news sometimes, right? Maybe maybe somebody did something wrong inside the company. Maybe you had a quality problem. Maybe one of your customers had a death. You had all kinds of things that can happen that are just horrible. And you got to somehow face them head on and take the bad news and keep the patient in mind and say, you know what, I'm going to take the bad news. I'm not going to admit it. I'm not going to duck it. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to grab it and make the best of it and say, okay, where do we go from here? Because I think if there's anything that's most important that keeps a company alive and young and vibrant and moving is our ability to adapt, right? Because if there's one thing we know for sure is our world keeps changing. In some ways it changes really slow. In some ways it changes at lightning speed. And your ability to be agile, see the change, adapt, move, be different, do what you have to, be solid with your principles. We're not going to change being patient-focused, but almost everything else is open to discussion based on what's going to happen. And this is part of being a learner. It's probably my favorite thing that I look for in leaders and our employees more than anything else is people that are learners, that are humble enough to say, I don't know everything. I'm learning, and constantly take every day as a school day. Those are people that I'm willing to bet on every day.
Mike, question here.
Yes?
So I've heard Edwards have this, I don't know if you call it advanced technology. It's basically managed like a startup. So it has its own system. If you can elaborate a little bit on it. But my question mainly is, why medical device companies are still so old-fashioned in the way that they manage the company in comparison to their Silicon Valley IT counterparts, like not giving that much autonomy. We heard about 80-20% Google thing, but we don't see that much in medical device companies. Is there something intrinsically different in the nature of work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do have something that we call our Advanced Technology Group. Right? We acquired a company a long time ago. Actually, it was one of the companies that was doing this work, and we actually, and he's the guy that we built this advanced tech group around, and we give him money and we let him spend on new crazy things, and as hard as it is, we find some kind of way to fund their work and their crazy ideas and all that. And we give them a lot of freedom, and they're wrong most of the time, but sometimes they're really, really right, okay, and change the way that medicine's practiced. So it's very cool. In medical technology, a couple things that I'd say. One is, because you have this patient responsibility, there's this part of the culture that says, be careful. Okay, let's make sure that every heart valve is the same. No deviation, no creativity. So you've got part of the company that's in a rigid quality system where every heart valve is made the same. So can you implement that and then have this other, Silicon Valley part of the company? Not easy to do. Okay, so you have that as one constraint. And the other constraint that probably affects people is that, in general, how fast is this growing? There's people trying to constrain healthcare spending, right? And so depending on the size of your company, you say, wow, maybe I'm not growing fast enough to be able to support that kind of R&D, and I should stay more within myself and be a little bit more conservative. And so it's how you drift into that space. I mean, I'm not a believer in it, but you can see how the space ends up that way. Good question, though. Yeah?
My question has to do with the other part of innovation than your company. Clearly what your company does, the inventions are really necessary, but they're not sufficient to get into a patient. So how do you deal with this system of innovation where there's just so many players, and physicians who have to change, healthcare systems, payers, governments, things like that. And so what's your role in creating the readiness in the market so that your inventions can become innovations that save lives?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So the short answer is you better show up with big time evidence, okay, when it's all done. So if I stand up here and I show you that video, and it works every time in the video, right? It's never gone wrong in the video, but is it going to work on a patient? Are you going to trust your grandmother to go into that procedure? Like, well, I don't know. And the physicians will feel the same way, and the folks that are writing the checks feel the same way. And so what you better bring is a really well thought out effort in which you have demonstrated through specific clinical trials that says this works, okay? Here is the difference, the mortality difference. Here's the difference in complications if you do it the old way and the new way, and here's hardcore scientific evidence, because we generated the evidence at Emory and 50 other major hospitals in the US, et cetera. And along with that, we measured the economic impact of doing it the old way versus the new way. Here it is. Here's the dossier that supports that. And we went out and measured these patients' quality of life and said, what was their quality of life like, the old way and the new way? Here's hardcore data, as hard as we can get it. The quality of life is still a little softer than economics and morbidity and mortality, but we worked really hard so that when we come forward, we have hard evidence. And as a matter of fact, if you don't bring evidence today, you don't move the needle. Okay, it's, arm waving and a great personality is nice, but it's not going to really make the difference when it's all done. And that's part of the equation. That's why medical technology innovation is hard. It takes years, a lot of money, a lot of time, because you have to generate, even once you have the good idea, you need the evidence if you're going to make medicine change. Anyway, thank you very much for all your time.